On today's episode of the Locked On Knicks podcast, the New York Knicks survived a nuclear outing from Anthony Edwards to stay undefeated this preseason, but not without some controversy in Donte DiVincenzo's homecoming.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, what's up, guys? You are Locked On Knicks. I wanted to remind you that you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. I want to thank you for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day, because we're now available on all platforms. So be sure to subscribe and hit the notifications bell to ensure you never miss an episode on the YouTube side. And then hit that auto download function on your podcast platform of choice to ensure you always have us with you on the go. But who's shilling for subs? I'm Gavin Schall, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster. I've been covering the NBA for about a decade. A good chunk of that time as a credentialed media member. And today we get into the Knicks 115-110 victory over the Minnesota Timberwolves. A lot to talk about on the basketball side of things. But first, I just wanted to, I guess, kind of, for lack of a better term, get it out of the way. It feels weird to bury it. But a strange and somewhat controversial homecoming for Donte DiVincenzo. It started about halfway through the first quarter where he drove and one finish and then kind of got a little chatty with the Knicks bench, seemingly addressed Tom Thibodeau and said, "Can't finish, right, Tibbs?" And then was sort of like gesturing towards presumably Rick Brunson and saying something along the lines when Tibbs had exited the area, "This is what happens when they let you run the show," which to me feels like a joke, right? It feels like, hey, like I'm kicking your butt because you're the coach, and that's something he's saying to his friend's dad, right? And that felt like friendly fire to me, but like in a benevolent way, right? I didn't really think there was much to it when I saw it live, outside of the fact that Donte, like most really good NBA players, is a hyper-competitive dude who was understandably offended getting traded 2 or 3 weeks before the start of the season when he thought he finally found his NBA home, right? Like he kind of got sent out of Milwaukee unceremoniously after winning a championship there. Golden State was really good to him, but was ultimately just a one-year run. And then he takes what was a little bit of a discount even in the moment to sign with this Knicks team to play with his friends. Ends up performing in a way that it is a substantial discount, and that's a two-way street, right? Like he credits Tom Thibodeau substantially in terms of having that career year and blowing away any prior performance he's had as a player. And yet, when you set a three-point record for a franchise, when you hit one of the 5 most iconic shots in that team's history, when it becomes evidently clear that the identity of the team is Jalen Brunson and his friends, when you watch that adorable and tragic GQ interview the 4 of them had, it feels like that was even further cemented that like this was one of the great stories in the NBA and was going to be one of the great stories in the NBA for the next 4 years. And these guys, even if Julius Randle, again, barring a trade, was nominally the second best player, those 4 guys were supposed to be the face of the team. And then you are the one of those 4 that's traded when I would argue at this point, and probably because of this point, he is just a more valuable and more impactful player than Josh Hart is, despite everything that Josh Hart does. While Mikal Bridges, who he outperformed tonight, was traded for 5 first-round picks. If you are Donte DiVincenzo and you are a hyper-competitive MFer, you're going to come out and try to roast the Knicks. And he did exactly that on the court. He was fantastic in this one. 15 points, 7 assists, 3 rebounds, 6 of 11 from the field, 2 of 5 from 3, 9 points in like pretty quick succession in the first quarter. His playmaking looked amazing at one point. I think this was actually his last field goal, hit like a crazy turnaround jumper as a bailout after the Knicks had a great defensive possession over both Josh Hart and OG Anunoby. Like if you were going to talk, and I think anyone who's ever played pickup basketball has experienced this before, where you come into a game with a little bit of emotion and you start playing really well, like you're going to get a little spicy in how you talk to the other team. But then that escalated into something that to me like felt competitive, but like ultimately like all within the realm of good fun, to him and Rick Brunson kind of getting like face to face and needing to be separated after the game. And I think Donte acknowledged as much after the game, said the comments from the free throw line were a joke, and then clearly implying the exchange with Rick Brunson was not a laughing matter, saying that he had no comment and he's going to address that privately with Rick Brunson. So maybe there's something we don't know there. Maybe there is a little bit of bad blood over what Donte's role was going to be on the Knicks, and that like he clearly and fairly felt like underestimated and underappreciated after, again, what was an incredible season where for at least short stretches, like he was the Knicks' number one option, and then he was going to be banished to the bench and then was ultimately traded. Like, I understand why there was some anger there, and it was honestly just really bad luck that he had to come back this quickly, because I think if the return was just the regular season return, it was like a month or two into the year, I don't think the level of emotion would nearly be this high. And I think it was probably a good thing that Julius Randle did not play. And whether that was medical, whether that was Chris Finch kind of anticipating that could get bad, there was going to be a lot of emotion there from Julius as well, though he seems to be a little bit happier and settled in going to Minnesota. I am not sure about the second part, but I saw fans who were sitting close to the Timberwolves bench apparently saying that like Donte and Julius were sort of talking trash about like the Knicks' new additions, guys like Campaign and Landry Shamet. And again, like who wouldn't be salty in their shoes? So I get it. I'm hoping down the road things are a little better, just because I want there to be warm feelings between two guys who I would credit like in large part with resurrecting this team and getting them to where they are. As far as like actual regrets about the trade, it's obviously way too early for all that. All I can say is it was painful to see Donte in another uniform. And Minnesota looked really, really good. And Anthony Edwards is extremely happy to be playing with Donte DiVincenzo, though I'm sure Jalen Brunson would say the exact same things about playing with Karl-Anthony Towns and the spacing that he has available to him now, which stood out for another game on offense right after a pretty slow start. That was mostly just OG Anunoby cooking. He scored 10 of the Knicks' first 11 points, had 17 points in the first half of the Knicks. Jalen really got going in the second half after a 19-3 Timberwolves run that we will talk about in a little bit more depth as we go along, and a possession that featured Anthony Edwards, like the deranged, lovable lunatic that he is, clapping in Jalen's face in a preseason game and like absolutely getting in his grill defensively. Jalen on that play tried to go at him. Ant did a great job like tying him up, forcing him into a tough fadeaway mid-range that Jalen, to his credit, almost hit, and it would have been the moment of the night if it did go in for Jalen. Jalen proceeded to just kind of cook from that point forward, hit a runner, then snuck in to draw foul, then another layup off of like a hezzy fake handoff to Cat, bursting all the way to the rim, repeatedly like going right at Jaden McDaniels and drawing foul after foul there, which was exciting because that is a more difficult matchup than he is generally going to get this year. And that was something I was thinking about watching McDaniels guarding Jalen. And my initial thought was, oh, that's going to be the direction a lot of teams try to go defensively now against Jalen Brunson, putting a big guy on him, putting a big lengthy wing on him, given the success Kelly Oubre had. Of course, that's what a lot of teams tried to do already, and they did not have a lot of success doing it. But this year, most teams don't even have access to that kind of option, given Mikal Bridges, given OG Anunoby. If you're putting a big wing on Jalen Brunson, unless you are just freaking huge across the board like the Timberwolves or like the Celtics, you are going to have to put a guard on one of Bridges and Anunoby, and that can be a recipe for disaster. As we saw those two cooking, even against the Timberwolves, when they had smaller guys in them at different points. But I thought that was interesting, and I was impressed with the way Jalen responded, because he had Donte just like cooking him off the dribble at one point in the first half. He had Ant, who appeared to hit him on the face on the play, but just back cutting him for a dunk. He had Ant clapping in his face, and those two have a bit of a history, right? I think that's where Ant got so competitive, because he was on the floor with Josh, Mikal, and Jalen, all of whom he was teammates with on Team USA 2 summers ago when they had that World Cup run. But it was a really nice finish for Brunson again after that 19-2 run, after the Knicks were trailing by I think as many as 12 points in the second half. Just got going. pumped another defender, was able to finish through contact. He had 9 straight points, and then finished up his night with just a ridiculous half-court lob to Mikal Bridges, which Mikal caught in midair, did sort of I'd call it like a 120 to pivot back to the basket in midair and finish it. It was really, really impressive stuff from Jalen Brunson, who again finished with 24 points in 24 minutes, 6 of 13 from the field, 11 of 13 from the line, 6 assists, 3 rebounds. But the flip side of that was there was just a lot of weight on Jalen's shoulders to carry this offense. And it is pretty clear that the Knicks are missing the presence of Julius Randle in terms of having a second shot creator. And that is a big concern of mine, because this trade, as I've preached and a lot of other people have preached, was designed to make Jalen's life easier. And I think until the Knicks figure out their offensive identity, it is going to be spread out and let Jalen cook. And that is going to make his life harder. And you just do not want to put that type of load on the guy who is the face of your franchise, is not built like Isaiah Thomas, but there's a long history of undersized guards breaking down and not being the same player under that kind of strain. And what he had to carry the second half of last year through the playoffs, having a 30+ usage rate, is just not sustainable, even if Jalen is a little bulkier, particularly in an NBA that is allowing more physicality than ever. So I think that's something the Knicks have to address. How they can do it, why they have to do it. We'll get into that in just a sec here on Locked On Knicks. But first, I want to tell you about our good friends over at FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, you live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Where you want to get started, there's a lot of options. Knicks opening night line against the Celtics. I've been referencing that a lot. Alex has been taking you through the Mets lines. But I am on a hot streak with the NFL. I told you a week ago to take the Vikings over the Jets. Then I told you to take the Bears over Jacksonville. Maybe my success is only when the game is in London, because I've not been as good in America. But I'm going to try my hand at it anyways. I would take the Bills minus 1.5 over the New York Jets tonight. Now, that won't be a popular pick for a lot of you, but even though I think New York is coming out motivated, I think they're coming out playing cleaner football. I'm just not a big believer in Aaron Rodgers at this point in his career against this defense. Hoping Garrett Wilson has a nice night, though, for my fantasy team. Again, if you want to get started with $200 in bonus bets, head over to FanDuel.com. Thank you for joining us back on Locked On Knicks. We appreciate you making Locked On Knicks your first listen each and every day. A 115-110 victory for the New York Knicks over the Minnesota Timberwolves. It was a little bit of a mixed bag from a basketball perspective. I thought in what I would consider like the first facsimile of a regular season game, right? Like it was not always high level basketball, right? Because there were some pretty clear cut execution issues on both sides. The Timberwolves missed a ton of open shots that the Knicks conceded to them in the first quarter before Anthony Edwards got scalding hot and at one point hit like 4 threes in a row. There were execution issues defensively for the Knicks. There were execution issues offensively for the Knicks. We can start off on the offensive end of the floor. I think I'm going to hit on a couple of different areas. The biggest thing to me is that the offense needs to find an identity and needs more structure, which I want to be clear before people accuse me of doomsdaying. I understand that this is the preseason. I understand that this is a completely new Knicks team, and they have to establish some continuity, establish some chemistry, figure out a pecking order. And Tom Thibodeau, you have to have confidence, even if he's not the most creative offensive coach in the world, that will get done in time. And we're just 3 games in, so you don't expect it to look like a finished product. And we've seen in the history of these like star trios and star quartets in the NBA, like it takes time. The Heatles started off 9-11 that first year, and because of all the shooting the Knicks have on the floor, the beauty of it is even when it's not looking good, and even when guys are not hitting their shots, you can still have a very effective offense, and you could have a Knicks team that, again, I think played far from their best in this one, and ultimately, like I don't even care about winning the game, but like while the starters were on the floor, generally felt like it was pretty even between these two teams, right? Like the Knicks were up early, then Minnesota went on that big run, and then before the starters went to the bench, the Knicks went on a big run to answer and pull close in this game. And that is my most encouraging takeaway, because I think the Timberwolves are going to be fantastic this year. You have to caveat it with the fact that they were missing Julius Randle in this game, so they were shorthanded, while the Knicks were not shorthanded. And yet, I think, like we've seen with the Knicks at times, where they play a little cleaner when Julius is off the floor, I could see that being true for the Timberwolves this season. And they get to boast so much shooting and so much spacing when they have Naz Reid, when they have Ant, when they have Donte on the floor, all with Rudy Gobert anchoring. Like, this is a great team. And again, the Knicks played far from their best and stuck in it. So that's the positive. The negative is what I was saying earlier about Jalen, where you can just see, like, as of now, because there's not a clear-cut identity, the default is throw Jalen the ball and let him cook. And that is great. That is fine. The Knicks can win a lot of regular season games that way. They might even be able to get through 2 rounds of the playoffs that way. They are not getting past the Boston Celtics. They are not getting to the NBA Finals. They might not even be good enough to beat the Bucks and the Sixers if their offense is just let Jalen cook. And this was kind of my chief concern coming out of the trade with the Wolves, was losing Julius Randle, the one other guy who could reliably initiate offense, right? And it's such a funny contrast between him and Towns, where Towns makes it easier for everyone to get their offense with his gravity off the ball. But in terms of actually, like, directly one-for-one creating shots for guys, he is not really the same presence as Julius Randle is. And we've gotten to see that throughout this preseason, for someone who XJ, when he came on the pod, called a top 5 to 10 offensive player in basketball. He is not like a handed to him and let him cook. There will be moments of that. And I liked how aggressive he was in this game, like trying to bully his way to the basket, but he is just not the same guy as a self-initiator as he is an off-ball weapon. And his shooting is the biggest part of that, right? And this shout out to Shax on Twitter for pointing this out, but Towns 31% last season on catch and shoot threes. I looked this part up. He was 31% on pull-up threes, 43% on catch and shoot threes. And right now, you see a lot of self-creation for Cat. And he's had 2 straight games where he's been able to like throw a jab and like hit like a little step back 3, like do the mellow, which was great. And like at times, like against great defenses, like that'll be what the Knicks have to live with. And you hope Towns shoots a little bit better on those shots than he did a year ago. And I'm none of this is me saying that's a bad shot for Towns. It's a bad shot for the Knicks offense. The point is, the beauty of Karl-Anthony Towns is supposed to be that you're going to live off of one of the easiest shot diets in the NBA, both for Towns and everyone on this team. And that doesn't quite happen when Jalen is the only one initiating offense. And right now, Mikal Bridges is a little bit MIA. Things got significantly better on that front in the second half. It looked really good when Mikal got to play with a really fun lineup that Tom Thibodeau put out there in the bench unit, where it was Deuce, Shamet, Mikal, OG, and Cat. And that was a group that separated. And I'm hoping in a game that seemed like, again, a facsimile of what the Knicks' actual rotation is going to be this year, with the starters playing 9.5 minutes to start the game and then 8 minutes and 44 seconds to start the second quarter. It does sort of feel like this is mostly what we're going to get. I'm hoping we get a little bit less of Jericho Sims and a little bit more pressure Situ at center. I think we're going to get a little bit more time with kind of hybrid units with Mikal. I think has to be the focal point of bench units, because right now he just does not have a role proportionate to his talent with the starters. And I think, to me, that is probably the single biggest thing the Knicks have to figure out, because right now it feels like get the ball to Jalen over and over again. Like everyone sits around, watches him try to create an easy shot for someone, and the Knicks are just trying to play out of Jalen going to work, right? And that, to be fair, has mostly been the Tom Thibodeau offense, his 4 or 5 years with the Knicks. And if that is going to be the Tom Thibodeau offense, like, again, like I shouldn't even say it that way. That cannot be the Tom Thibodeau offense if you don't have Julius Randle, right? If you have 2 guys who are really good at that, and you have a great offensive rebounder, Mitchell Robinson, you can play that kind of anachronistic ISO ball and still find a lot of efficiency. That is not the way to maximize this version of the Knicks, They got to find ways to get Mikal Bridges the ball on the move. They're certainly doing that in transition. There are a couple of times where they do that kind of improv on the fly in settled half-court situations. There has to be more drawn up for Mikal. There has to be more drawn up off the ball for Cat. And I'm not saying Tibbs isn't doing that at all, right? Like they ran a nice little set that had like Cat like kind of curling around. It was almost like the Knicks version of like elevator doors where he was like running around, 3 different screens off the ball. I think that's supposed to turn into a post up and would have been a good look if Cat turned into a post up. Instead, he ran all the way outside the arc to the opposite corner. Ant switched right onto him and Cat couldn't really get a great look off there. And so the Knicks are trying some of that stuff and they'll continue to try more of that stuff, but they're just not utilizing everything they have right now. Like to that point, Josh Hart has literally not made a shot through 3 preseason games. And I think that's partially Josh Hart just sort of deciding to not take the preseason super seriously. And outside of Jalen Brunson, if there's one guy on this team that has earned the right to not take the preseason super seriously, it's Josh Hart after he averaged over 48 minutes a game through the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, right? Like if he wants to extend his vacation a little bit longer, like God bless the guy, that's okay. But they could use him to get shots for other people like he was doing throughout the playoffs. They could use Mikal Bridges, who was the number 1 option last year on the Brooklyn Nets, to get more shots for other people. So it's on Tom Thibodeau. It's on these guys to be more aggressive. And it's on Jalen to give up the ball more willingly, get off the ball a little bit quicker. I think all of this is very, very solvable for the Knicks, but it's something to keep watching because there is not a Julius Randle who is going to call for the ball on his own. So it's going to take a collective group effort to ensure everyone's aggressive. And look, I'm the one guy I'm not mentioning in the starting lineup, OG Anunoby. No issues with that, right? He was really, really, really good initiating offense in this one. And we're going to talk about it in just a sec here on Locked On Knicks. All right, so what a first half it was for OG Anunoby. I mentioned it, 10 of the Knicks' first 11 points over the first 6 or so minutes of the game, where pretty much no one else was looked really ready to play, and Donte was coming out and clearly on a mission to embarrass the Knicks. I love this start from OG. Hit a early 3. And the next possession got Rudy Gobert on a switch. And I love the way he's attacking it. Like we saw last year in that limited regular season run that OG had, like his bread and butter is his mid-range game. And like, it's a little Kawhi-esque, like just using his physicality to get shots there and kind of a quick start and stop. And he did that, like put one in over Gobert. Had another one where you can see the power of the Brunson Karl-Anthony Towns like pick and roll. And this is again one of those moments where like you don't have to do a lot as Tom Thibodeau, like just the gravity that those two has creates offense in and of itself, where Brunson and Cat ran it. And Nas was helping to the elbow off OG on the right wing. And like that is sort of those are the Sophie's choices, if I can make that a plural, that you are going to have to make as a defense when you have Brunson and Cat on the floor to say, hey, OG Anunoby is a very good shooter. He's elite from the corners. He is kind of mediocre from the right wings. I think the stat was something like 45% from the corners, 34% from the wings. I'm going to give OG Anunoby a wing 3. This time OG Anunoby made that 3. If he consistently hits that 3, if he hits that 3 closer to 40%, defenses are going to have their head spinning, right? There was just not an answer there in terms of guarding the Knicks, because more often than not, you are going to have to involve a third guy to help at the nail when Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns run some version of a pick and roll or pick and pop. Is it just impossible to defend with 2 guys unless they're like Anthony Edwards and Rudy Gobert? And even Anthony Edwards and Rudy Gobert had their issues guarding it with just 2 guys. And then OG absolutely cooked Gobert. He was driving. He stepped back to the foul line, pump fake, Gobert flying by, 2-step to the rim. That is a move just flat out stolen, ripped out of the Jalen Brunson playbook. I love to see it. Really clean, maybe something he was working on in terms of expanding his bag this offseason. I thought his rebounding, and we'll talk about it more, but Karl-Anthony Towns rebounding was really impressive. Had a nice offensive rebound, set up Mikal Bridges on a relocation short jumper. The one thing I didn't love from OG offensively in this game is that he started short arming a lot of really good looks from 3. And that is something that DJ talked about in our player preview when I was asking DJ if there's a chance for OG Anunoby to expand his offensive repertoire as a scorer this year. TJ said one of his main hesitancies in going that far was on top of just the lack of bag, the lack of handle that's there, which is all really fair and well and good, is the energy transfer on his jumper. And for a guy who is built like a brick, what house, and like there's no question about his physical strength, like he for some reason, like at times he shoots and it looks like only his upper body is putting any momentum into the ball. And you'll see him short a lot of shots from the wings that go in from the corners. And it almost seems like an adjustment that he made, probably being too strong at a young age and overshooting. And I wonder if there's a way to correct that. Again, that probably would have happened this offseason if it was going to happen this year. But it is something to watch, because when he gets his dip right, when he gets his energy transfer right, his shot is a thing of beauty. And I just think more often than not, especially like if the Knicks tried Deuce in the starting lineup in place of Josh Hart, OG is going to be the one who's left open on the wing. He's going to be asked to take a really high volume of threes this year. And if he goes from a good three-point shooter to an elite three-point shooter, that again just makes this Knicks offense just a little bit more unguardable. Also had just one of the best passes I've ever seen him throw on the Knicks. Like in that electric run with that second unit that sort of pushed the Knicks ahead for good in this game. There was a possession where Deuce had like a run out in transition, kicked it out to OG, and OG was like about to shoot and instead spotted Cat wide open under the rim, and OG just fired a laser to Towns. Like, and it's just one of those things that I talked about with him over the summer. When you play with great passers, it is contagious, and you kind of start seeing things that your teammates see, and that was like an Isaiah Hartenstein, a Josh Hart, a Donte DiVincenzo type pass if I've ever seen him, right? Just heads up, smart, on the money. It was a really cool play. I liked it. The only other thing I'll note with OG Anunoby, and I'm sure I'll get some mean comments for this, is again, I'm not loving the way he's moving this preseason defensively. Did a pick, I think it was Josh Minot's pocket, and actually finished with a dunk in transition, which I thought was a really good sign, because he'd been unwilling to go up and jam it recently. But again, was laboring a little bit on that play, and then just could not stick with Anthony Edwards. And look, Anthony Edwards is what, top 5, top 6 offensive player on planet Earth. Sometimes he's going to make the best defenders look stupid. He was putting in some work against Mikal Bridges as well in this game, but you were just used to OG like competing in those matchups, and he wasn't super competitive one-on-one with Ant. Again, maybe just a bad matchup for him. Maybe just doesn't have quite the foot speed for that. And I am sort of like looking at last season's performance through orange and blue glasses, but I am going to continue to watch that, because I just don't love the biomechanics of how he's moving, and the lack of smoothness there is not great. But we talked about Brunson in depth. I just wanted to, before we finish talking about Karl-Anthony Towns, wanted to go a little bit more in depth on his game, because I thought it was fun, even though he did not shoot the ball particularly well, right? Just 5 of 13 from the field. Made up for it by being hyper aggressive, where I mentioned Mikal, like coming out of that first half, you were like going to put up like missing posters for him with a reward. And same with Josh Hart. That was not the case for Towns. Like right away to start the game, try to step back 3 on Gobert. He missed it. But I just like the shot after he had so many nerves last game. Like he did not appear nervous in this one. He came out similar to Donte, wanting to kill, and just wasn't quite as effective doing it. Didn't score the first 9 minutes, but did have 5 rebounds. And that is my biggest like takeaway in an, I don't want to say an area of concern, because we talked about the rebounding stats and the fact that he was a really good rebounder early in his career, but it was something I was watching relative to Mitchell Robinson, relative to Isaiah Hartenstein, who are great rebounders for the Knicks. To see Cat come out and get 16 rebounds in this game and 4 offensive in just 29 minutes is extremely encouraging. Like, and they were physical rebounds, right? Like he was throwing his size around against Rudy Gobert. He was like ragdolling multiple Timberwolves, and the Wolves are, like, don't really have someone to match Towns, but Gobert is like a big time rebounder. Like Nas is a big physical presence. All the wings, Anthony Edwards are physical guys down there, and Cat over and over again was just sort of asserting himself and playing how you want to see a Tibbsy and big play. So I thought that was really encouraging. And then the defense continued to be pretty solid. Like at one point switched on to Josh Minot, forced him into an air ball on the reverse with a great contest. Committed a really dumb foul on mine out on a corner three, but I like the effort rotating over, even if it looks a little awkward when he's sprinting to the corner. It was just a play where the entire Knicks team was in rotation, and not to take a shot at the guy, love the guy, but a lot of times you see Julius Randle on the tail end of that, and he would just kind of half-heartedly jog out, and it would just be the most dispiriting thing in the world when the rest of the Knicks defense was so committed and playing with so much effort. And you got Cat hustling even if he made a dumb play, and that's going to happen sometimes with Cat. But just a couple of brilliant bully ball drives. One, like where OG set a pick and he instead rejected it, pivoted the other way, sped past Naz Reid for a jam. Another brilliant bully ball drive on Gobert through help and banged another three. Tried to jam on Naz and drew a foul on him. Had really nice timing on a cut off a Jalen Brunson drive. Sorry, I shouldn't have said timing, but like really good instincts off a Jalen Brunson drive to cut to the rim. Ultimately went out of bounds because he was like a little too fast to get there and they weren't quite on the same page. But that's another one of those plays that'll come with time. So I thought really, really encouraging game for him. I thought Mikal, again, really encouraging second half after a first half where he was sort of MIA. Early second half where he switched on to Ant and certainly looked better in that matchup than OG did, but at times had his hands down and gave up like an 8-3 to Anthony Edwards, who I've said it before, but was just scorching this one, 31 points. And what did he play? Like 29 minutes or so? Yeah, he had 31 points in 26 minutes, which is just crazy. The Knicks had no answer for him. And if this was a regular season game, Ant might have had 50, which you don't want to see when you have Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby with the express purpose of not letting guys like Ant get 50. But again, Mikal looked totally set free with that second unit. The lob from Brunson was great. He continues to just kickstart transition for the Knicks, and that has been one of my biggest takeaways this preseason, and something I probably should have mentioned before the 30-minute mark of this podcast is the way he's running the floor. I saw Benji Ritholtz compare it to OG I was gonna say OG Toppin, Obi Toppin. He's just taking off, and Josh Hart over and over again is finding him. And that feels like the Quickly Obi connection that we all came to know and love on this podcast and watching the Knicks. And again, like when the floor was open and the Knicks had like a genuine 5 out with that second unit, you could see how he turned the corner on Gobert and beat him to the rim for the layup. Had another transition opportunity where he pushed the ball, threw it ahead to Cat. Cat didn't feel comfortable shooting, so Cat gave it back to him on like a little DHO coming around. Mikal proceeded to circle around the corner, the left corner, do a Nash dribble where like he rotated like all the way under the rim and then zip it out to Deuce McBride, sprinting up the floor for 3. And I just love that play because we've had these stretches of improvisational brilliance from Josh Hart when the Knicks before they traded for Josh Hart were just like, not to say they didn't have fun moments, but we're sort of like just a boring, predictable, like by the notes offense. And Josh just threw in some randomness that I think you need to be a great playoff offense. Mikal feels like another guy who fits into that DNA of just being able to have like spouts of like improvisational brilliance on the court and use his speed and like just his decisiveness to catch defenses off guard. And that is really fun to watch. And I hope to see more of it. And I don't think we've totally unlocked the best with him. Had a really weird free throw, and I've been worried about this for a while. Like if you've watched Mikal in warmups and in practices, like he's trying out this form where he shoots the ball way over his head with no dip. And like that is something that'll happen sometimes, right? Like Duncan Robinson's really good at that, the no dip threes. But he shot a free throw that way, and Anthony Edwards could be here saying like damn, like this. He said another word. This guy changed his form, and I'm hoping that is not a thing for Mikal Bridges. If he's a broken jump shot, you don't want to give up 5 first-round picks for him. He airballed 2 threes in this one. Did hit another one that looked nice. I think it'll be fine, but just something to watch. Other notes: really nice night for Jericho Sims defensively, except for the fact that he managed to foul out despite only being on the court for 12 minutes. So that wasn't good. Did have 7 rebounds. I liked his activity. Precious Achiuwa was good. I want to see Precious Achiuwa get more run at center, where I think he is a much more effective player. And he's a power forward. Deuce McBride, again, that 3 was a lot of fun. He's been a little chucky and a little inefficient this preseason. I kind of like him getting those shots out now where he's the focal point of those second units. I hope he's able to play a little bit more of a complementary role when the actual games get started, presuming he's going to be out there with Mikal, with Cat. And again, like I think Tibbs was like under stratifying those units and mixing them up and sticking with the line changes for now. I think next preseason game, or maybe in the fifth one, we'll see a little bit more of like, hey, like I want to see again, like that lineup with Cat, OG, and Mikal, with Deuce and with Precious. Like that was really fun. Or a version of that's 5 out with Brunson out there. But there are a lot of options the Knicks can go to. And I think the most important thing is you get a lot of shooting, a lot of scoring, a lot of creativity on the floor when Jalen Brunson is not on the floor, because Jalen Brunson, for some stretches, can't carry this offense. It was another good game for Landry Shamet on a separate note, even though he didn't shoot it that great, hit a couple of big shots late, including a 3 to push the Knicks ahead. At one point, picked Anthony Edwards' pocket and went coast to coast for a jam. And he was playing, he was the guy in that second unit that gave them the shooting. He was playing really nice defense, playing on a string with Deuce, OG, and Mikal. And that's the note I'll end on. Just watching those three defend together with Cat, with Landry Shamet on the floor, like it was just really clean and really fun. And I was saying preseason, before we knew Mitchell Robinson was hurt, I was hoping to get a lot of time with those 4 on the floor together, because I think they can just smother opposing bench units and not give an inch. And even with Cat in for Mitch, you have Deuce, you have OG, you have Mikal. Like some magic is going to happen, and I hope we get to see a lot of that. But anyways, that is it for this edition of the Locked On Knicks podcast. Plenty more to come this week. Hopefully some more fun guests, some more player previews. And it's going to be a fun lead up to the season, and hope you stick with us on Locked On Knicks for all of it.